So let's go ahead and get into Chapter 5. On Chapter 5, we're really looking at constraints using dimensional constraints, using geometric constraints in our sketches. And I guess up to this point, it's probably something that you've already used, but I just want to make sure that you are using this the correct way, and then also making sure that you're using all of the constraints that you have here instead of just getting stuck on one or two, and then making sure you know how to turn these constraints on and off. So I'm just going to start off with a general sketch like they completed in the book here. I'm just going to sketch this in here. So when I draw this one, we've already discussed about the purple lines. When you have the purple lines there, that is signifying that the part is not constrained or not fully constrained. As you go throughout the chapter, some things that we're going to be looking at is just making sure that you look over here in the lower right hand corner, and this will tell you how many dimensions that is needed for you to fully constrain this part. So first let's look at like the geometric constraints and look at the way that you would go ahead and assign them. So as you notice, when I sketched this, I didn't lock in my lines vertical or horizontal. I just drew those in freehanded, and I didn't lock in anything. So, one method of applying constraints is to apply the constraint as you are drawing. So if I've got that one there, you can see the vertical constraint is automatically locked in. As I move over here, I've got the 90 degrees. That one is going to be constrained. And then I keep on with like, that's a vertical, and then another 90 degrees. So those constraints are assigned as you're completing your sketch. But you can choose not to do that, just depending on how you draw with your mouse. So what I want to make sure you understand is, assigning these constraints and making sure that that you know how to turn them on and off. So right now I have my show constraint on, so that's why mine are popping up there. I'm going to right click my mouse button and it's already there. There we go. So that one's when it's show, and then hide all constraints. So that's when I have hide all constraints. You can see that I don't see my constraints there unless I pick on the actual feature itself, and you'll be able to see the constraint pop up. So assigning them. So if you would like to make that line right there vertical, you can come up here to these constraints and click on the vertical constraint, and that's going to assign it. If I click on another line right now, it's going to make that vertical. I'm going to hit the escape button, and I'm going to click on the horizontal, and I want to make that one horizontal. So that is using the geometric constraint. I've geometrically constrained that to vertical and horizontal. So now I want to use dimensional constraints. So I'm going to be able to constrain the size and location of these three lines in reference to each other and also to 0, 0. I like to start off, and I've kind of been over this before, I like to always have my part constrained to the origin. I like to put the dimension at 0, 0, so then that way I know where that point is at all times, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So that in itself right now just constrained those two lines to the origin. Therefore the purple lines turn to black, and they're constrained. That is a horizontal line, that is a vertical. If I were to now go back in here and put the a dimension, let's say we put an angle on here, and then also define a length of this line right here, that would constrain this part, and now I have this part constrained as far as this part goes. Oops, I forgot about that guy over there. Let's erase that. Alright, so now I'm fully constrained. I looked over and said, why do I have 4 dimensions needed? But anyway, so this part is fully constrained when you have successfully turned all of the purple lines to black, and that's just an indicator. There's no need for me to give a dimension on this piece right here because I have the angle. I could have chosen not to give the angle for this and then give a size dimension for this to specify what I want for that height. So I could give that 5, and then so the angle is whatever it is. So those are all things that you can set up based off of whatever you're doing with your sketch and how you're designing. So just remember as you're creating these sketches that you do have this ability to go back and constrain and change those constraints as needed. So let's turn on, I'm going to turn on my show constraints. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to have the show constraint icon there. It's just popping up. There we go. I'm going to just click on that one and it's, what is going on there? Show all constraints. I always forget about this button right here. You can also click on this button. That is a button that if you click on that, it will show the constraints on your drawing as well. If you have those constraints shown and you decide that, hey, I don't want this to be a vertical line, I do need to, put a different angle on that, you can right click on that and go into delete, and you can delete those constraints so they're not there for good. You can change them. If I wanted to move this point here, come on, it may be, I'm probably locked down, I'm locked down 0, 0 on that. But if you wanted to change some of those features when you're, I'm sorry, I'm trying to do two things. If you wanted to change that angle or get, not have that, there we go, that's what I was trying to do, and not have a vertical line, you can make that change by removing the constraint. So right here I've removed that horizontal constraint, so I'm not locked in on that that horizontal constraint. So if I click on that there, I don't have any other constraints assigned to it, and I can go in and specify the dimensions and change all of those values that I want, and just freely dimension this part and change that as needed. So I'm using the dimensional constraints to lock this down, and I still have 3 dimensions needed in order to fully constrain this part. But I just want to make sure you understand you can turn on, turn off, delete those constraints as you are sketching and designing. So I'm going to back up my drawing just a little bit so we can look at actually placing a circle in this part like was given in the example in the book. I'm going to go ahead and make some changes to my drawing here. I'm going to locate this right here, put that in. Let's do this. I'll bring this over. Let's get rid of that dimension. Let me back that up. I wasn't expecting that to go over to the right. I wanted that to increase its dimension on the left, and it's doing that. Okay, so let's just do this. I'm going to put a vertical constraint on this one here, and a horizontal constraint here, and that dimension that is between the point here and 0, 0. Where did my 0, 0 go? There we go. The 0, 0 has back. Alright, I'm going to back that up because I don't know why that 0, 0 kind of disappeared on me there. I'm just going to move that over. And let's see if I can do that again. Let's put a dimension on here too. There we go. I want that to be about 5 inches. And there we go. So I'm now going to place a hole on this part. So as you are placing other either features, circles, rectangles, and everything, you should be seeing the little dashed hidden line. That's representing, that you are constraining to some other feature. So, for example, that green dot right there, more than likely that is going to be that midpoint of that line right there. And sometimes we just want to make sure that we're not putting the feature there. So, if you have to look at your drawing as you're placing this, and if it's something that you just want to dimension as you are moving along, you may want to just watch out for those. But if you know that, hey, I want this circle or I want this cutout to be on the midpoint of that line, then that might be the right choice for you. So, take a look at that as you are, working on your drawing, and make sure that you are, locating that in the right place, and that you're not, misplacing something. So I'm going to use the dimensional constraint to locate the circle. I'm going to put that at 2 inches, and then making sure every time we put a circle in there that you're identifying it with a X and Y axis, and then also putting the size. So the size defines the size of the circle. So we've located it in both directions, and I've put the actual size of the circle. And now that part is still missing a couple dimensions, I'm going to click on this one just to show the automatic dimensions and constraints. I'm going to use that button just to kind of quickly lock that down. I'm going to click apply. It's going to search for the item that needed to be dimensioned, and it put a vertical constraint on that line right there, and now that part is fully constrained. So this button, the one at the top, is an automatic dimension and constraint. It will finish placing any values or constraints on the part to fully constrain it. So it's a pretty handy tool. A lot of times I probably tend to use dimensions a little bit more, but if it's something that you can quickly fully constrain it and then go back and place the dimensions and move things around, you can. Now, even though it's fully constrained, doesn't mean that you cannot change values. So if I wanted to change the value, I could change that. I can still change the size. It's just fully constrained, and that's what we're shooting for when we are creating our sketches.